On the way, but first, your BBC News at exactly 7 o'clock this Wednesday morning. Nick Wilson has your headlines. Morning, Nick.
Sheffield Council says it is listening to campaigners over the cutting down of trees. Yesterday, it emerged that 32 out of the 35 war memorial trees threatened with being felled would now be saved. Campaigners say the same should apply to other healthy trees across the city. Cabinet member responsible for the tree replacement programme, Councillor Dagnall, says an announcement will be made in the next few weeks, but the details need to be agreed first.
Well, dialogue and compromise is definitely the way forward at this point. It's definitely a productive conversation we're having with groups across Sheffield. And if it takes time to heal the wounds of this long-running dispute, then it takes time. But I'm hoping this will offer reassurance to people that in the special case of war memorial trees that people have highlighted to me, that they will see real action by the council.
Toby Foster.
Toby Foster.
At breakfast.
BBC Radio Sheffield.
Good morning, it's Toby at breakfast. It's the BBC, don't you know? Now, shall we talk about this? Because there was a development on the tree felling programme in breakfast yesterday. The majority of the trees planted in Sheffield in memory of fallen World War I soldiers are now going to be saved from being cut down. 20 healthy trees of the 23 originally earmarked for felling on Western Road are now going to be kept. Councillors had voted in December last year to remove the trees, saying they would be too expensive to save. Well, Paul Brook is the co-chair of Sheffield Trees Action Group. He gave his reaction to the news as it broke yesterday.
It's really good news that this information is now out there, that 20 of the trees are going to be reprieved and not felled now under a new proposal. I think it's very late in the day that this has come out, and it appears to have come out through a leak. It's disappointing that the council hasn't announced this weeks and weeks ago. They informed us back at the end of September that this was going to be their proposal, and it's very odd that the news hasn't come out earlier than this. No, well, we'd agreed to hold the talks in confidence so that we could have a really good discussion, and we've maintained that confidentiality through the process. We did advise the council that given that the 100th year ceremony memorial of the end of the World War I was coming up, that really an announcement should have been made on not just the Western Road War Memorial trees, but there are others as well. I can't speak for the council as to why that they have changed have made a U-turn on this. They stated to us and to local campaigners that 20 of the trees could not possibly be saved by any engineering solutions. 20 of them were down for felling for damage to curb line, damage to pavements. 3 of them were listed as either having diseased or in poor condition. As I understand it, they're saying that the 20 that they had stated couldn't be fixed, they now can fix.
Well, the news that the trees had been reprieved was initially given to us by the Green Party. Green Party councillor Douglas Johnson said it was welcome news, although he says it does leave the council with big questions to answer.
It's fantastic news that the trees are safe here, and it's been a fantastic campaign by the Western Road tree campaigners and everyone involved with that. So it's full credit to them. It shows that what that persistence and that power can do. But what this really tells me is there's some really big questions to answer about how the council administration has gone about this. This is about that control of information, control of power to press ahead with a deeply unpopular policy. And the real question here is, if this can be done on Western Road, and to be fair, those trees really are snarling up the pavements there. If that can be done on Western Road, then why can't it be done on every other residential street across the city? The council is now doing simply what they were asking the council to do all along, and that is just to do those really common sense solutions to, keep the trees that are so well loved in situ and just work around them a bit. It's really not that difficult to do. And of course, what we said all along is that the council's got a great get out here in terms of saving cost. You simply leave the tree, and you don't have to go to all the expense of getting it felled and all the issues around that, and dealing with protest and all that work that was put into spinning the stories about what the council said it was doing with the trees that have been going on for years. And if you look at the resources the council's put into their insistence on felling these really popular trees, it's just crazy at a time of cuts.
I just don't understand how we've got here. What about the response yesterday from the Cabinet Member for the Environment, Dagnall? He came on and spoke to Howie.
Well, I can confirm that we've developed a plan for the war memorial avenues across the city that will see out of the 35 trees that were proposed to be replaced, we think we can now save 32 of those, and it's only 3 decaying trees that will have to be replaced.
Well, the council previously said that saving the trees on Western Road alone would cost £500,000, and the Cabinet decided it wasn't prepared to spend that money. So what's changed?
Well, that was a proposal that was put forward last year, and obviously, given the conditions of government austerity, that money couldn't be found. But since I've come into post, I've said that we need to find a compromise from all sides that will enable us to draw a line under the long-running dispute about tree replacement work as part of Streets Ahead and move on as a city. And I've gone and met residents and campaigners across the city, and one of the things that they've said to me, above all, is that they regard these war memorial avenues as a special case, and they want the council to give special attention to how we can protect these war memorial avenues around the several schools in Sheffield where they were planted following the First World War.
So where's the money come from? Is it a cheaper solution? What's going on?
Well, it's worth saying it's a different proposal to the one that was brought to Cabinet. It was brought to Cabinet and suggested that the council would have to pay extra public money in, but since I've called for compromise from all sides, Amy have re-evaluated their options and they've offered this proposal, which Amy will cover the costs of to do the work, and we'll be talking to residents over the upcoming weeks and months about what that looks like in practice. But the headline figure is that we can save nearly all of these trees, and we will be replacing the 3 decaying trees. Now, on these streets, there have been trees that have been removed in the past few decades and never replaced. And the other thing we're going to do is we're going to talk to residents about whether they want us to plant extra trees to replace these former trees that were previously removed.
If the council had originally gone ahead with the plans, these trees would have been replaced by saplings. So surely it's sensible at the end of the day that perhaps compromise is the best way.
Well, dialogue and compromise is definitely the way forward at this point. It's definitely a productive conversation we're having with groups across Sheffield. And if it takes time to heal the wounds of this long-running dispute, then it takes time. But I'm hoping this will offer reassurance to people that in the special case of war memorial trees that people have highlighted to me, that they will see real action by the council to respond to their concerns.
Do you feel reassured? Because it's only last December that the council told us that the only way these trees could be saved would cost £500,000, could send water flooding into the houses, and would make the houses on Western Road potentially uninsurable. That's what it said in their report. And now there's a compromise where we can do it all for free and everything will be fine. Does that actually reassure you? Does that make you think that you can trust a word anybody's saying? How's that changed in less than a year? Lewis, give us a call, please. 0800 111 49 49.
Toby Foster at breakfast
On BBC Radio Sheffield.
I'm just going to read out what happened last December. This is the report from the council signed off by Lorraine Manley last December about Western Road trees. They said then each tree would build out into the road, average of 5 metres long. That means they'll lose 35 parking spaces. The road will be reduced in width. One-way working was considered, but it felt it would lead to an unacceptable increase in traffic. Some of the work still wouldn't be possible as it would cause problems with private property threshold levels and could result in water from the road running into the property. Where root damage is occurring to private property leaving trees in place, it will lead to insurance claims and ultimately the houses will become uninsurable. That's what they wrote last December. Yesterday they went, that's alright, fine, we'll do something else then. Really? Can anybody believe a word in this story? I just do not understand it. If last year it was going to lose you 35 car parking spaces, cost £500,000 and make the houses uninsurable, how come now you can do it with a bit of tarmac? Somebody give me a ring. Because I want yesterday's builders to come and do my drive, not last December's. Understand, we don't have time really, but I understand Lewis Dagnall is on his way to the studio. Here he comes. Earlier on, we've already mentioned about the Western Road War Memorial trees, which yesterday we were told by the Green councillors were going to be saved. This is because there have been negotiations between the Sheffield Tree Action Group and Sheffield City Council. And yesterday we were told that councillors who had voted in December last year to remove the trees, saying that they would cost too much to save, now decided they're going to save them. Councillor Lewis Dagnall is in charge of the environment for the Cabinet member. Here he is now. Lewis, good morning. Thanks very much indeed for coming in. I appreciate that.
Good morning.
Last December we read this out on air. This is the reason why he decided that the trees had to go. Western Road was going to cost £310,000. To keep the trees meant that we would lose 35 parking spaces. Some of the works would make water run into the properties, which would ultimately make the houses more uninsurable. Uninsurable. That's what we were told was the truth last December. Why is that not the truth now?
Well, that was the proposal that was put forward last December. And last year the council was overspending on its budget because of the pressure of government austerity. The council drew up a proposal which would see the retention of the trees, but at such a price tag to the public purse that it was simply unaffordable. But what we've been trying to do is to reach a compromise that recognises people's concerns. And one of the concerns I've heard above all is that people want war memorial avenues that were planted around these schools after the First World War to be treated as a special case. And they want them to be kept intact. We already knew that this time last year because people had already been in court this time last year. So the council aren't paying for this now, are they? Well, part of the compromise is that Amy will be covering the costs of the work that's done.
So Amy have just found £500,000?
It's not the
that
same
they couldn't
proposal.
Find last year.
As I said to Harry yesterday, it's not the same proposal necessarily as the one put forward to the Cabinet. What Cabinet was presented with a proposal.
But do you understand why people are upset? Because last year we were told, this is signed off by a director at the council, probably on 120 grand a year, and we were told that after all the looking and all the work, this was the truth. You couldn't do it for less than £500,000, so we weren't doing it. Less than a year later, you went, okay, well actually we can do it and it's going to be free.
It's not going to be free, is it? It's going to be at a cost to Amy rather than to the council.
So why wasn't that last year?
A week is a long time in politics. It's taken 6 months for us, since I came in as Cabinet member, to be working through to reach a compromise on trees across the city.
If it hadn't been for the protesters, these trees would now be down.
Not necessarily on Western Road or on Binfield Road or Tay Street.
According to this report from last year, they would.
So
do you understand why people aren't trusting the council? I think the
most important thing here is that people were concerned. There was misinformation flying about. But as a result of the news breaking yesterday, I've had to come in and confirm this, which I think should offer reassurance to people that these war memorial avenues will be kept intact.
Oh, no, and I'm sure they're absolutely over the moon about that. But last year, the council told us, after I don't know how much this report cost. I don't know how much it cost to get a director to sign a report in the Sheffield City Council. But this time last year, we were told specifically this couldn't happen. So how do we believe anything that's ever been said?
Well, the situation has obviously changed. We've been in a pause on the tree replacement programme since March this year. That's a dramatically different position to the one we're in. Yeah. We've been working very hard behind the scenes.
What's
We've been saying we need a compromise.
That's what people don't get. Last year we were told, no way, £500,000. Are you going to lose 35 car parking spaces?
Well, this is a proposal. That was a proposal. This is a different proposal where we hope it won't have the same impact. It certainly won't come at the same cost.
So this just looks like fabrication last year. It just looks. If you've now.
I don't think it does at all. I think the listeners can understand that a proposal was presented to the Cabinet last year,
but not the best proposal.
Well, this is a different proposal because it's one that we've worked up and one that Amy are covering the cost of.
But Lewis, please, you've got to understand that there's all these alternatives considered and rejected is one of the things in last year's.
Okay.
So there's all this stuff that we know you looked at and rejected, and now you're telling us that 10 months later, well, yeah, there was one thing that could work, we just didn't look at it.
No, that's not what we're saying.
People don't believe
We're saying that these things have changed. We're in a hugely extended pause in the tree replacement programme in which we've been reconsidering all the options. I could tell you the full details, but this news broke obviously as a result of a leak from the opposition party, which means that we don't necessarily have the full details to hand today to offer the full briefing. But what I did do yesterday was we hand-delivered letters to people living on Western Road, on Oxford Street, on Binfield Road in Meersbrook, to let them know that this is true and we can save 32 out of 35 trees. Apart from the 3 decaying trees.
But you don't actually have the actual. You don't know how just yet. The total details.
Well, my officers and Amy do.
Right. And why didn't we do it last year?
We're in a completely different position to one we were in last year,
Just tell me one of the things that's
where
manifestly
all
different.
sides have recognised that we need to find a compromise to move forward.
Just tell me, just give me, if you will, please, from last December to today, what's the one physical difference, which means something that was going to cost £500,000 and we were told just to accept that, now isn't going to cost you anything. Tell us what the physical difference is that's sucked that £500,000 up.
This is an important part of the way forward. This is a way we draw a line under this long-running dispute by recognising what people have said to me, which is, in this case, war memorials are a special case, and it's important to keep those avenues intact.
OK, look, they were saying exactly that this time last year. Nothing's changed. So tell me, because people had already been in court this time last year. So we knew all that this time last year. This time last year, you told us, this is the truth, this is the reality, it will cost £500,000. Once again, what's the physical change that means it now comes to you at zero cost?
Well, as I explained yesterday, we'll be following this up with consultation with talks with residents to explain this in more details.
Is there a difference, or have you just decided?
In this week, ahead of Remembrance Sunday, I think the most important thing, now this news is broken, is that 32 out of the 35 trees that people were worried about.
I'll ask you one more time, because I understand it's difficult when you keep hearing people asking questions. But this time last year, it was going to cost you £500,000. What has the physical change be that it now isn't going to cost you £500,000?
OK. I think it seems like it's difficult hearing the answers. Last year, there was a proposal put to the Cabinet, which is the Cabinet could step in and spend £500,000 to do that work. What Amy have come up with now is a different proposal, which Amy will cover the cost of, and which will be speaking to residents on Western Road about the implications
that being the case, then, the work that you did last year that said it's going to cost £500,000, lose 35 car parking spaces, may have to go to one way, would flood houses, would make houses potentially uninsurable. That's what you told us to believe last year, and we believe, rightly or wrongly, that when you put out a report from Cabinet, that you've exhausted all the opportunities.
Well, that last year...
Turns out you hadn't exhausted all the opportunities, because down here there was an opportunity that would cost you nothing.
Last year, the Cabinet had a Streets Ahead programme, which we were elected to deliver. Amy had a contract specification, which they were contracted to deliver. What's happened now is we've been re-elected to deliver the Streets Ahead programme, but we've said the best way of delivering this programme, of achieving the investment to Sheffield, that means roads, footpaths across the city, and trees are going to be maintained properly across the city. The best way of doing that is to reach a compromise on the tree replacement programme. And one of the headlines of that compromise that I was told would need to be there would be a comprehensive solution for these war memorial avenues, which is the news that's broken this week that we found.
But we knew that last year. Nothing's changed, apart from it's not going to cost £500,000 anymore.
That seems like a fairly major change to me and my colleagues who are setting our council budget.
Honestly, bring them to my house, because my mortgage is £800 a month, and if they can just make that disappear...
Well, I mean, this is a trope that's commonly used about politics, but public finances aren't the same as a mortgage. Public contracts aren't the same as mobile phone
because I pay my
contracts.
mortgage, you don't pay, Amy. The Sheffield City Council taxpayers are paying this, and it just looks to them...
Well, the Department for Transport is underpinning this with £642 million.
Like what you told us last year was the truth, now... actually it isn't the truth, and there is another way. Are the houses going
That was a true proposal. If the Cabinet had £500,000 last year, if the Cabinet had £500,000 last year, as they said, they could have implemented that. Even we don't have £500,000 because the government, which draws no support from elected MPs in Sheffield, has imposed brutal austerity on the public finances of Sheffield. But I think we've got into the. I think we've got into a public.
In this document last year, there were 11 houses that were structurally affected by...
Don't you want to listen to... You must have listeners across South Yorkshire and North Derbyshire who are listening in, who think, actually, this is basically good news.
It's great news.
That these war memorials are preserved intact. As I said in my statement yesterday, I think the remembrance period is a difficult one for many families who have lost loved ones in recent conflicts. It's a difficult one for people reflecting on the conflicts and the costs of war in the 20th century. And I think what's most important is that this period of quiet remembrance isn't overshadowed by a political debate. I don't think this is a political debate. It's a people's life debate. But this report you gave us last year told us there are 11 houses which were being structurally affected
and to such a degree by 11 trees that they had to come down. 10 months later, that's not the case. And I think that's what people don't understand, Louis. Everybody's pleased that those trees aren't coming down, the war memorial trees. The people who are interested are pleased. But if you told us last year that 11 houses were going to be structurally unaffected...
See, I've spoken to many people, and I've had correspondence overnight from residents who don't say they don't understand. They say they understand perfectly, and they're very pleased to hear it. And they await the full details, which we'll be bringing out in due course.
I'd be pleased to hear it, because last year you told us the work was going to flood the houses. Now you're telling them it's not.
Well,
you've changed the reality.
I can reassure people that their houses won't flood as a result of this proposal. This is a comprehensive proposal that means we can retain 32 of the 35 war memorial trees.
OK. Are you disappointed that Amy didn't give you this last December? This proposal?
Well, like I say, I think we reached a point earlier this year in the spring and when we realised that in order to achieve this Streets Ahead programme, this investment we were elected to deliver, we would need to find a compromise. And we need all sides to find a compromise, including Amy as our contractor. I'm pleased that they've brought forward this proposal.
What compromise have they done? What are they going to do?
Well, I've said this before, which Amy will offer more money for upfront work, and they'll also take on more financial risk with the work they're doing, which isn't necessarily... It's not plan A. This is a plan B. So they'll take more financial risk that if they need to come back and repair work because of damage from trees in future years, they're taking on that financial risk, not the council.
And what about the trees that have already been knocked down because we were told they had to go? In reports exactly the same as this. People will think, well, if this report can change, why couldn't the other reports have changed? All the trees that have gone, did they need to go? But there was just this one that was different.
If you look at the example of the war memorial on Heathfield Road, the 2 trees that were taken down there earlier this year were both diseased. And, you know, I must emphasise, one thing I've heard above all from people is that they regard war memorial avenues that were planted as avenues to commemorate those lost in the First World War as a special case that we should give special attention to. And actually, you know, there's been many trees that have been replaced in Sheffield over the past few years because they're dead, because they're dying, because they're diseased. You know, we've seen in another situation in Never Edge where we've got the Chelsea elm, which is an example of outstanding biodiversity, where we reached a compromise with a local campaign group and with the Sheffield Robber and Wildlife Trust that have enabled us to keep that tree that was initially proposed for replacement.
Yeah, I think the point that is interesting here is the trees don't really affect a lot of listeners, as our texts have shown you in the past. What I think will worry people is that what we were told was the cast iron truth in December has now just been changed, and that has to be a concern. This is a piece of work that went through Cabinet, signed off by Lorraine Manley, the Executive Director of Place. I'm guessing it cost a lot of money to do this. We were definitely told these were the only solutions, and now they weren't. And I think people will worry about that, because either last year was a fabrication to stop...
What's changed? What wasn't in that paper was the option where Amy have come forward and said, we've drawn up a proposal where we're happy to cover the cost and shoulder the risk. That wasn't an option in December. It's this year where all sides have realised that we need to reach a compromise, and Amy is part of that. So that was an option the council could have done. Yeah. The council could have, like with your builder, if you want to use that analogy, you ring up your builder and you say, I've contracted you to do this work, I want you to do it differently. And he'll say, it's going to cost you an extra such and such. That proposal we drew up last year, the council cabinet could have agreed, and it would cost, you know, all that money, which we don't have because the government's cut our budget. What's happened this year is by all sides realising that we need to come to a compromise if we're going to move on, if we're going to celebrate what's great about this city, including its biodiversity and its trees. All sides need to reach a compromise.
But then that means when you wrote it, when somebody wrote in this report the sentence, ultimately the houses could become uninsurable. Amy must have known about that, and Amy must have known there was another way to make it happen. You told people that the reason you were making this decision was that it could make their houses uninsurable. That's a nasty way of upsetting people. I'm not doing this because nobody will insure your house. 10 months later, I said there's another way to do it.
Well, but,
and your house is fine.
Insurance issues with trees frequently occur.
Yeah, but in this report, you told them that they couldn't save the trees because it would make their houses uninsurable. Of course, people are then going to go, in that case, let the trees come down. 10 months later, we now find out that's not the case. That's not true. You can do it without making the houses uninsurable. You've got to see that people are just going to look at you and go, what else have you misled us on?
Well, I don't think that's been my experience at all. I think people understand that we've been working really hard to find a compromise from all sides, including from Amy, and that with Amy now coming forward and saying they'll cover the costs, that means that this isn't a situation where we're taking money away from adult social care or making cuts in order to pay for this work. This money is coming from an external source.
I get that. I just wonder why. I just think people are going to go, why didn't you ask that last year? Why didn't you do it last year? And because it's easy, isn't it, to go... Well, nobody's mentioned adult social care until the politician comes in. You could just have said to Amy last year...
Well, I think the people, the thousands and thousands of people across Sheffield who use adult social care services really think that those services are valuable.
Which is why you've just bullied them with it, why you've just threatened them with it.
I don't think that's a threat at all.
You put that in, that wasn't there. This is something that a private company are doing.
As the elected council, we have to make serious decisions and difficult decisions about how we're going to balance a budget when the government has cut it by more than half with an austerity programme which is completely economically unnecessary. We've made difficult choices in order to continue to provide good public services. We've got a programme of investment in the highways which has seen highway satisfaction soar in Sheffield when it's plummeted in other people. The Chancellor in the budget last week said that many councils across the country are struggling with the inability to fill in potholes on roads across the city. We are relaying roads from the ground up. We're maintaining trees, we're replacing trees, which many other councils can't afford to do in the situation they're in.
Well, to be fair, you can't. It's a PFI, which Labour said they're not going to do any more of.
Well, we're going to find alternative methods of public investment.
But what's going to upset people is this time last year, you told people it's going to make your house uninsurable, it's going to flood, we're going to lose 35 car parking spaces, and they accepted that as a reason why the memorial trees had to come down.
I don't think they did accept that, because I've met many residents who have since said...
Well, that's what you intended them to do, and now there's just another way out of it, and I think that's going to upset people. But at the end of the day, the memorial trees aren't coming down, which has got to be a source of, for people who are involved in the campaign, there's got to be a source of joy.
Well,
that's what they
I'm sure for residents across the city, and I think I would ask that, over the next few days in the lead up to Remembrance Sunday, I think with the issue of war memorial trees, we need to be sensitive to the emotions that they'll arouse in people. In due course, we're currently carrying on our mediated process with STAG of working through the proposal for the rest of the trees, and in due course, we'll bring that forward for public debate. Next year, we'll co-produce a tree strategy that will map out the potential future of highway trees in Sheffield. There's lots of good stuff happening on trees. I've met a lot of residents as cabinet member for trees who recognise that we're making progress on this, that we're in a better situation because by pledging to compromise and by doing hard work, we're making progress.
Recognise that. Certainly be seeing you out on the streets talking to people, and appreciate you coming in this morning. Thank you very much indeed. Lewis Dagnall, who wasn't booked for today's show, heard us talking about it earlier on and drove in, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much indeed.